Andy To, and I'm the Research Director for Business Insurance, and it is my pleasure today to present and share with you some of the highlights from our most recent diversity survey report. If you have not read it, it is in the September issue of the Business Insurance, and the title of the article is Diversity in the Workforce, Protests and Pandemic Expose Racial Disconnect. So instead of repeating what's already in the report, I thought I would share some background and additional insights to the survey. It was a huge survey and there were plenty of data to sift through. Firstly though, I want to say thank you to the Business Insurance Diversity and Inclusion Institute for providing this platform to showcase the survey, and also a quick shout out to the people who work behind the scene to make this possible. This is the 5th year that I've done the diversity survey. When we first started, we actually did it in 2 separate surveys, one focusing on diversity and the other on career trends and attitudes. To reduce survey fatigue, I actually combined the 2 surveys and split the reporting and releasing the survey into 2 reports. So please look out for the December issue for the sequel. 2020 has been a surreal year to say the least. Amidst a global pandemic that literally locked us down at home, and then followed by an outburst of chaos and protests over the death of George Floyd, I figured there's a pent-up frustrations and people would want to talk and to find an avenue of release. So I decided to just go ahead and tack on 20 questions to the survey, and I thought not to do so would be a disservice to the project, so we ended up with a 60-question survey this year. To my great relief, we had over 1,000 responses just in the very first 3 days after the survey was deployed. When all said and done, we received over 3,000 responses over 3 weeks. After filtering out for US-based respondents working in the insurance industry, we ended up with 2,200 responses, which is 2.5 times more than what we have received in the last 2 years. And many more minorities responded than any time before. About 250 blacks, 180 Hispanics, and 130 Asians, compared with just 166 total non-white minority respondents in 2019. Why is a high number of responses important? For sure, it gives us better data, but more importantly, the high number of responses also allow us to make meaningful comparisons amongst the different racial groups. So, if you got nothing else from this presentation, my one takeaway for you is please help us by encouraging your coworkers, your staff, your friends, your family members, and everybody around you to get as many people as possible to respond to our surveys. It helps. With that said, there was a mountain of data to sift through this year. As the title suggests, I think none of us is really surprised that there is a disconnect between how different racial groups view racism or any diversity and equality issues, especially with the Black Lives Matter protests as the backdrop. But for the first time with the survey, I can quantify this divide. Now, is there systemic racism? Black or African American respondents are almost 3 times more likely to say there is systemic racism in the insurance industry than white or Caucasian respondents. 86% of black compared with 31% of white respondents, and then followed by 43% Hispanic and 54% Asian. Conversely, only 5.3% of black respondents saw no systemic racism in the industry, compared with 45% of their white colleagues. The gap is quite large. On the question of whether they think there is sufficient diversity in the insurance workforce, again, there is a huge disconnect between black and white respondents. Only 8.8% of black respondents said there is sufficient diversity, with 88% taking the opposite view. Compared with 37% of whites said yes, and half of them said no. Hopefully the gap between yes and no within the black respondents will narrow in the future, or maybe even next year. So, if you get the chance, please go to the Business Insurance website and download the September issue and read the full report. We see this black and white divide play out to different extent with almost every question. But the report also looked at differences between male and female respondents, as well as the generational gap between millennial, Gen Xers, and baby boomers. On the question of whether they feel optimistic or pessimistic about the prospects of changes coming to the industry in the wake of the protests, I was kind of surprised that almost the same percentage of Hispanics and white respondents, 53.3% versus 52.9%, said that they are optimistic that real change will follow. This is in contrast with 34% black and 46% Asian. We have to dig into this more to understand why the Hispanic insurance professionals, percentage-wise, are so closely in line with white respondents. However, as a follow-up with this question, we did an open end asking in their own words why do they feel the way they do. I was again very pleasantly surprised that 1,424 respondents actually wrote in, which is quite unusual. And some of the written responses are actually quite long. In total, we received 666 written responses from those who said they are optimistic that real change will come, and 332 said they feel pessimistic and that things will stay the same. The rest, 426, were either not sure or don't know. I think this is another indication to show how motivated people were to talk, to vent, to express how they were feeling with all that is happening in the country. And our survey just happened to give them that avenue to do so. I also think, just my personal hunch, that because many people were working from home, also gave them more time, more privacy, and that safe space to fill up the survey. I don't think that we would have gotten such overwhelming response if people were still working in the office. Reading through the open ends, certain common themes do appear over and over. It may be a half glass full or a half glass empty scenario, depending on how the respondents chose to look at it. Here are some excerpts from those who say they feel optimistic that real changes will follow. I think the protest has woken the world. This is a tipping point. I am seeing more candor. Clearer understanding that silence is not an approach. Diversity has become a commercial issue. Leadership has finally put it in writing. Awareness brings change. Younger generations are coming into the workforce, already seeing changes happening. And here are the excerpts from those who say they feel pessimistic that no change in status quo, things will remain the same. Movements cannot articulate specific goals. Protests are polarizing. Just hype in a political movement. Not the first time the insurance industry has been challenged for its lack of diversity, so embedded in our culture. It's an old white boys club. Too much nepotism. Do not believe systemic racism exists. Diversity no longer implies blind hiring, it implies quotas. It is not enough. Now, only time will tell what will happen. We also opened up the Business Insurance Diversity and Inclusion Institute members to submit questions to add to the 2020 survey. We received one submission asking whether respondents agreed or disagreed with the following statements. I believe I work in an environment where everyone is treated fairly, regardless of age, disability, ethnicity, gender, sex, nationality, race, religion, sexual orientation, veteran status, and other individual differences. I work in an inclusive environment where different opinions and perspectives are encouraged. The leadership is genuinely committed to attracting, developing, and keeping a diverse workforce. As you can see, the responses are quite consistent with the widest difference coming between black and white respondents. Hispanics almost the same as white respondents, and the percentage of Asians coming in between. Lastly, with possibly a second wave of the pandemic looming, I thought I should end with this last slide. How concerned are the different groups feel about returning to the office if there is no vaccine? A significant larger percentages of minorities, between 60 to 70%, the white respondents, 50%, express concern about going back to the office if there is no vaccine for COVID-19. Women are also more likely to say they are concerned about returning to the office than men, 63% to 47%. So if you are an employer or manager planning to call people back to the office, do keep that in mind. Finally, thank you. And please look out for part 2 of our diversity survey report in December. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the conference.